Raskolnikov had been a brisk and active defender of Sonia against Lutzin, in spite of the fact that he himself bore so much horror and suffering within his soul. Having endured so much that morning, it was as if he had been glad of this opportunity to vary his thoughts and feelings, which had become intolerable. This was quite apart from any element of personal sincerity in his striving to intercede for Sonia. Moreover, his approaching rendezvous with her was preying on his mind and causing him terrible anxiety. He would have to tell her who had killed Lizaveta, and he kept sensing in advance the fearsome torment that would cause him, a torment he was almost physically attempting to ward off. And thus it was that when, as he left Katerina Ivanovna's, he exclaimed, "Very well, Sofya Semyonovna, let's see what you'll say to this." He had still been in a state of visible excitement which was connected to the briskness of the challenge he had issued to Lutzin, and to his recent victory over him. But within him something strange took place. As he approached Kapernaumov's rented rooms, he felt a sudden sense of fear and helplessness. Outside Sonia's door he stopped, pondering to himself the strange question, "Do I have to tell her who killed Lizaveta?" The question was a strange one because suddenly, at the same time, he felt that not only must he tell her, it was impossible for him to put off that moment, even temporarily. He had not yet managed to fathom why it was impossible. He simply sensed it. And this tormenting acknowledgement of his own helplessness in the face of necessity weighed him down. In order to stop thinking and worrying, he quickly opened the door and from the threshold looked at Sonia. She was sitting at the table, leaning her head on her hands. But when she became aware of Raskolnikov, she immediately got up and came towards him as though she had been waiting for him. "What would have happened to me if it hadn't been for you?" she said quickly, meeting him as he was only halfway across the room. It was clear that she had wanted to tell him this as soon as possible. This was why she had been waiting. Raskolnikov went over to the table and sat down on the chair from which she had just risen. She stood 2 paces away from him, exactly as she'd done the evening before. "Well, Sonia," he said, suddenly feeling his voice tremble. "I mean, the whole business, it was all because of your social position and the habits associated with it. Did you grasp that just now?" A look of suffering came to her face. "Oh, don't speak to me the way you did last night," she said, interrupting him. "Please don't begin that again. I have enough torments as it is." She smiled quickly, afraid that he might find the reproach unpleasing. "It was foolish of me to leave like that. What's going on there now? I was on the point of going back, but I kept thinking that you might come here." He told her that Amalia Ivanovna was turning them out of the apartment, and that Katerina Ivanovna had run off somewhere to search for justice. "Oh, my God!" Sonia said, starting. "We must go immediately." And she snatched up her little mantilla cape. "It's always the same story," Raskolnikov exclaimed in irritation. "They are all you ever think of. I want you to stay here with me." "But what about Katerina Ivanovna?" "Oh, you can't possibly avoid her. She'll be round here to see you herself now that she's left the apartment," he added tetchily. "And you know as well as I do that if she doesn't find you here, you'll be held to blame." Sonia cowered down on a chair in agonized indecision. Raskolnikov said nothing, looked at the floor, and seemed to be thinking about something. "Let's assume that Lutzin didn't feel like it just now," he began, not looking at Sonia. "Well, but if he had felt like it, or if it had been in any way part of his plans, he'd have tried to get you put in jail. And only Lebesniatnikov and I could have stopped him. He would, wouldn't he, eh?" "Yes," she said weakly. "Yes," she repeated in a state of anxiety, her mind elsewhere. "And, I mean, I might very well not have been there." And as for Lebeziatnikov, it was quite by chance that he happened to turn up. Sonia said nothing. Well, and if you had gone to jail, what then? Do you remember what I said to you last night? And again she made no reply. He waited until she was ready. And there was I thinking you were going to shout, "Oh, stop it! Don't say anything again!" Raskolnikov laughed, though with something of an effort. "What, more silence?" he asked, after a moment. "I mean, we have to talk about something, don't we? You know, I'd be quite interested now to learn how you'd deal with a certain question, to use Lebeziatnikov's word." He seemed to be growing confused. No, really, I'm serious. Imagine, Sonia, that you'd known in advance exactly what Lucien had planned to do, and known, for a certainty I mean, that it would cause the total ruin of Katerina Ivanovna and her children, and of yourself too, into the bargain. Since you don't attach any value to yourself, let it be into the bargain. Of Polya too, because she'll go down the same road. Well then, if it was suddenly given to you to decide which one of them was to go on living in the world, that is to say, whether Luzin was to continue his existence and go on doing loathsome things, or whether Katerina Ivanovna was to die, what would your decision be? Which of them would you have die, I ask you? Sonia looked at him nervously. She had sensed something peculiar in this unsteady monologue that seemed to be working towards something by a devious route. "I had a feeling you were going to ask me something like that," she said, giving him a searching look. "Yes, all right, but what would you decide?" "Why do you ask about something that's impossible?" Sonia said with distaste. "So you'd rather Luzin continued his existence, doing loathsome things? Don't you even dare to decide that?" "But I mean, I can't fathom divine providence. And why are you asking me a question that it's wrong to ask? Why such futile questions? How could that ever depend on my decision? And who am I to set myself up as the judge of who should live and who should not?" "Well, if you're going to involve divine providence in it, you won't get anywhere," Raskolnikov muttered gloomily. "You'd better come to the point and say what it is you want," Sonia exclaimed, with a look of suffering. "There's something you're hinting at again. Have you really only come here in order to torment me?" She could not hold out any longer, and suddenly broke into bitter weeping. He looked at her in weary gloom. Some 5 minutes went by. "You know, you're right, Sonia," he said quietly at last. He had undergone a sudden change. His air of assumed insolence and impotent challenge had disappeared. Even his voice had suddenly become strained. "I told you yesterday that I wouldn't come to ask for forgiveness. And yet very nearly the first thing I did was to ask you for forgiveness. That remark I made about Luzin and Providence was meant for myself. It was me asking for forgiveness, Sonia." He attempted to smile, but his pale smile betrayed something helpless and unfinished. He inclined his head and covered his face with his hands. And suddenly a strange, unexpected sensation, approaching a caustic hatred of Sonia, passed through his heart. As though in fear and wonder at this sensation, he suddenly raised his head and gave her a fixed look. But what he found was her own nervous gaze upon him, anxious to the point of torment. There was love in that gaze. His hatred vanished like a wraith. This was something else. He had mistaken one feeling for another. All this meant was that moment had arrived. Again he covered his face with his hands and inclined his head towards the floor. And suddenly he grew pale, got up from his chair, looked at Sonia, and, without saying anything, like an automaton, went over and sat down on her bed. To him, this moment felt horribly similar to the one when he had stood behind the old woman with the axe already freed from its loop, sensing that there was not another moment to be lost. "What's wrong with you?" Sonia asked, horribly frightened. He was unable to say anything. He had never planned to declare it like this, and did not understand what was happening to him. Quietly she went over to him, sat down on the bed beside him and waited, not taking her eyes off him. Her heart was pounding and sinking. It grew unbearable. He turned his dead-pale face towards her. His lips twisted helplessly as he tried to say something. A wave of horror passed through Sonia's heart. "What's wrong with you?" she said again, moving away from him slightly. "It's all right. Sonia, don't be frightened. It's just a lot of rubbish. In the end it really is rubbish, if one gives it any thought," he muttered, like a man unconscious and in a fever. "Only, why have I come to torment you?" he added, suddenly looking at her. "In the end, why? I keep asking myself that question, Sonia." It was probably true that he had indeed asked himself that question 4 hours earlier. But now he uttered it in total helplessness, hardly aware of what he was doing, and feeling a constant tremor throughout his whole body. "Oh, how you're torturing yourself," she said with a look of suffering. "It's a lot of rubbish. Listen, Sonia, this is what it is." For some reason he suddenly smiled, a pale and helpless smile lasting a couple of seconds. "Do you remember what I was trying to tell you last night?" Sonia waited nervously. "On my way out I said that I might be saying goodbye to you forever, but that if I came back today I would tell you who killed Lizaveta." She suddenly began to quiver in every limb of her body. "Well, and so I have come to tell you." "So you were in earnest yesterday?" she whispered with effort. "How is it that you know?" she asked quickly, as though suddenly regaining consciousness. Sonia had begun to breathe with difficulty. Her face was becoming paler and paler. "I just know." For a moment she said nothing. "Well, have they found him?" she asked timidly. "No, they haven't." "Then how do you know about that?" she asked, barely audibly, and again after a silence that lasted almost a minute. He turned round to face her, and gave her a look of the utmost fixedness. "Guess," he said, with his earlier crooked, helpless smile. Convulsions seemed to pass throughout her entire body. "But you're... Why trying to frighten me like this?" she said, smiling like a child. "If I know, then I must be a close acquaintance of his," Raskolnikov went on, relentlessly, continuing to look into her face as though he had not the help to draw his eyes away. "He didn't mean to kill Lizaveta. He killed her by accident. He meant to kill the old woman when she was alone, and he went there, but then Lizaveta came in, so he killed her too." Another terrible minute went by. They both stared at each other. "So you can't guess, then?" he asked suddenly, with the sensation of a man throwing himself from a steeple. "No, no," Sonia whispered, barely audibly. "Then have a proper look." As soon as he said this, a certain earlier, familiar sensation suddenly turned his soul to ice. He looked at her, and suddenly in her face he saw the face of Lizaveta. He had a vivid memory of the expression on Lizaveta's features as he had approached her with the axe, and she had backed away from him towards the wall, with her hand held out in front of her, and a look of utterly childish terror in her eyes, exactly as little children do when they begin to be frightened of something, stare motionlessly and apprehensively at the frightening object, move backwards, and stretching out one little hand, prepare to burst into tears. Almost the same thing took place now with Sonia. It was with the same kind of helplessness and fear that she looked at him for a time, and then suddenly, holding out her left hand, rested her fingers, slightly, the merest fraction, on his chest, and began to get up from the bed, backing further and further away from him, as her gaze fastened on him ever more motionlessly. Her horror suddenly found its way to him too. the same fear was displayed in his face, and he began to look at her in the same way, almost with the same childish smile. "Have you guessed?" he whispered at last. "Oh, for a merciful Lord!" The words tore from her breast in a terrible wail. Helplessly she collapsed onto the bed, her face to the pillows. A moment later, however, she quickly got up, moved towards him, seized both his hands, and gripping them tightly with her slender fingers that were like a vice, again began to look into his face motionlessly, as though her eyes had been glued there. This last desperate look was an attempt on her part to seek out and catch some last glimpse of hope. But there was no hope. There remained not the slightest shadow of doubt. It was all true. Even afterwards, later on, when she remembered that moment, she had a strange, uncanny feeling. How was it that she had been able to perceive with such immediacy that there was no shadow of doubt? After all, she could not very well have said that she had had a premonition about something of that kind, could she? And yet now, when he had only just told her about it, she suddenly felt it was precisely that she had had a premonition about. "Enough. Sonia, enough. Don't torture me," he begged her in a voice of martyred suffering. He had never planned to reveal it to her like this, but that's what it had happened. Almost unaware of what she was doing, she leapt up, and wringing her hands got as far as the middle of the room, but she quickly came back and sat down beside him again, almost touching him shoulder to shoulder. Suddenly, as though she had been cut to the marrow, she shuddered, uttered a cry, and without knowing for what reason, fell on her knees in front of him. "What is it? What have you gone and done to yourself?" she said despairingly, and jumping up from her knees, she threw herself on his neck, embracing him and gripping him as hard as she could in her arms. Raskolnikov started back and looked at her with a sad smile. "You're a strange one, Sonia," he said. "You put your arms around me and kiss me after I've told you a thing like that. You don't know what you're about." "There's no one in the whole world more unhappy than you are now," she exclaimed, in a kind of frenzy, oblivious to his remarks, and suddenly burst into violent sobs as if she were having a fit of hysteria. A sensation he had not experienced for a long time came flooding into his soul like a wave and instantly softened it. He did not resist the sensation. 2 tears rolled from his eyes and hung on his lashes. "So you're not going to leave me, Sonia?" he said, looking at her almost with hope. No, I'll never leave you, no matter where you go," Sonia cried aloud. I'll follow you everywhere. Oh, merciful God! Oh, how unlucky I am! Oh, why didn't I meet you earlier? Why didn't you come before? Oh, merciful Lord!" "Well, here I am." "But only now. Oh, what can we do now?" Together, she repeated, as though in a trance, embracing him again. "We'll go and do penal servitude together." A spasm ran through him, and his earlier hate-filled and almost supercilious smile forced itself to his lips. "I may not be willing to go and do penal servitude yet, Sonia," he said. And Sonia gave him a quick look. After her initial blazing and agonizing sense of compassion for the unhappy man, the terrible idea of the murder struck her again. In his altered tone of voice, she suddenly thought she could hear the murderer. She stared at him in amazement. As yet she knew nothing, neither why this thing had happened, nor what its reason had been. But again, she could not believe it. Him, the murderer? Was it really possible? "But what's happening? Where am I?" she said in deep bewilderment, as though she had not yet regained consciousness. "How could you, a man like you, do a thing like this? What's happening?" "Oh, I did it so I could rob her. Stop it, Sonia," he replied almost wearily, and even with a certain annoyance. Sonia froze as though she had been stunned, but suddenly shouted, "You were hungry! You did it! Did you do it to help your mother? Was that it?" "No, Sonia, no," he muttered, turning away and lowering his head. "I wasn't as hungry as that. I really did want to help my mother, but Even that's not quite correct. Now don't torment me, Sonia." Sonia clasped her hands in dismay. "But is this all really, really true? Merciful Lord, what kind of truth is it? Who could ever bring himself to believe it? And how could you give away that last kopeck you had, yet murder someone in order to rob her? Ah!" she cried suddenly. "That money you gave Katerina Ivanovna, was that the money you... Oh, merciful Lord, was it really that money?" "No, Sonia," he hurriedly interrupted. "It wasn't that money. Put your mind at rest. That money had been sent to me by my mother through a certain merchant, and I was ill when I received it, the same day that I gave it away. Razumikin saw it. He accepted it in my name. That money was my own, really mine." Sonia was listening to him in bewilderment, doing her utmost to make some sense of it all. "But as for that money, I actually don't even know whether there was any money there," he added quietly, as though he were reflecting about something. "I took her purse, the chamois leather one, off her neck. It was a full purse, stuffed tight, but I didn't look inside it. I probably didn't have time. Well, and the objects, all those cufflinks and chains, I buried all those things the following morning together with the purse under a building block in a backyard on the prospect. It's all still there now." With her whole attention, Sonia listened. "Well, but then why did you say you did it in order to rob her, if you didn't take anything?" she asked quickly, clutching at a straw. "I don't know. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to take that money or not," he said, as though he were reflecting about something, and suddenly coming back to himself again, gave a brief, quick, ironic smile. "That was a stupid thing I blurted out just now, wasn't it?" For a moment the thought flashed through Sonia's head, what if he's mad? But she abandoned it instantly. No, this was something else. She could make nothing of it. "Look, Sonia," he said, with a kind of inspiration. "Look, I'll tell you this. If the only reason I killed her was because I was hungry," he went on, emphasizing each word and gazing at her in a way that was mysterious but sincere, "I'd be happy now. That's what I want you to know." "And why should it mean so much to you?" he cried out a moment later, with something almost akin to despair. "Why should it mean so much to you that I confess to having done something evil just now? I mean, why is this stupid victory over me so important to you? Oh, Sonia, do you think that's why I came to see you just now?" Sonia again tried to say something, but no words came. "I asked you to come with me yesterday because you're all I have left." "Come with you where?" Sonia asked timidly. "Oh, not in order to go stealing and murdering. You needn't be scared. That's not the purpose," he said, with a caustic smile. "We're different sorts of people. And you know, Sonia, I've only just realised now where it was I was asking you to accompany me yesterday. When I asked you yesterday, I still didn't know that. I asked you for one purpose, and it's for one purpose that I've come to see you. I want to ask you not to abandon me. You won't abandon me, Sonia?" She gripped his hand tightly. "Oh, why did I tell her?" he exclaimed in despair a moment later, looking at her in infinite torment. "I mean, there you are, Sonia, sitting there, waiting for me to explain. I can see that. But what can I say to you? Why, you won't understand any of it. You'll just wear yourself away with suffering, all because of me. I mean, look, there you go crying and putting your arms around me again. Well, why are you doing that? Because I couldn't hold out on my own and went running off to someone else in order to unburden myself? You suffer too, and then I'll feel better? And you can love a villain like that? But you are suffering, aren't you?" Sonia cried. Again the feeling flooded into his soul like a wave, and again for an instant softened it. "Sonia, I have a spiteful heart. Take note of that. That may explain a lot of things. I came here because I'm full of spite. There are some who would not have, but I'm a coward. And a villain. Anyway, never mind that. All that's not important. I must speak now, yet I don't know how to begin." He paused and reflected. "Damn it, we're too different from each other," he exclaimed again. "We'd never make a couple. Oh, why did I ever come here? I'll never forgive myself for this. No, no, it's good that you came, Sonia cried. It's better that I should know, far better. He looked at her in pain. It really was that, he said, as though he had made up his mind. I mean, it really happened. You see, I wanted to become a Napoleon, and that's why I killed. Well, now do you understand? No, Sonia whispered, naively and timidly. But go on, I will understand. I'll understand it all in my own way, she said, imploring him. You will? Very well, then, we shall see. He fell silent and thought for a long time. It was like this. I once asked myself the question, what if Napoleon, for example, had been in my position, and instead of having a Toulon and an Egypt and a crossing of Mont Blanc to begin his career with, what if instead of all those beautiful and monumental things, he had quite simply had nothing but an absurd old woman and a petty bureaucrat's widow whom he was also going to have to murder so he could steal all the money out of her chest to help his career, do you see? Well, would he have been able to bring himself to do it if there had been no other way out? Would not the lack of monumentality in such an action have jarred upon him to such an extent that he would have viewed it as positively sinful? Well, let me tell you that I spent a horribly long time agonizing over that question, and that I really felt horribly ashamed of myself when I finally realized, and it came to me all of a sudden, that not only would the lack of monumentality not have jarred with him, it wouldn't even have entered his head. What was so jarring about it? And if there'd been no other way out for him, he'd have strangled her, without letting her utter a sound, without a moment's thought. Well, that's what I did too. I gave up my thinking and strangled her, following the example of an authority on such matters, and that's how the whole thing came to happen. Don't you think that's amusing? Yes, Sonia, the most amusing thing of all is that may really be how it came to happen. Sonia did not find it amusing at all. I'd rather you told me in a straightforward way, without examples, she asked him, even more timidly, and in a voice that was barely audible. He turned to face her, looking at her sadly, and took her hands. Once again, you're right, Sonia. Actually, all of what I've been telling you is nonsense, almost pure drivel. Look, you know, don't you, that my mother has almost nothing. My sister obtained an education of sorts and was then condemned to go wandering about as a governess. I was the focus of all their hopes. I went to university, but I couldn't manage to support myself, and I had to give up my course. Even if I'd stuck at it, the most I could have hoped for would have been to have become some kind of teacher or civil servant on a salary of 1,000 roubles a year, if things worked out favourably. He was talking as though this were something he had learnt by rote. And then, by then my mother would have wasted away with care and unhappiness, and I still wouldn't have been able to put her mind at rest. And my sister might suffer an even worse fate. In any case, who wants to let life pass him by and turn away from everything? Forget about his mother, endure the insults piled upon his sister in dutiful silence. Where's the point in it? Is the point to bury them, and then acquire a new family, a wife and children, only to desert them too, without a kopeck or a crust of bread? Well, and so I decided that once I'd got my hands on the old woman's money, I'd use it to meet my requirements during my first years at university, without being a burden on my mother. And for my first steps after university, and do it all on a grand scale, in true radical style, in order to build a completely new career for myself and set out on a new and independent path. Well, and that's all. Of course, my killing the old woman was an evil thing to do, but enough of that. He dragged himself to the end of the story with a kind of helplessness and lowered his head. No, that's wrong, Sonia exclaimed in anguish. And in any case, people are not allowed to behave like that. No, it's wrong. You can see for yourself. Yet, I mean, it was quite sincere. In what I told you, it's the truth. What kind of truth is that, O merciful Lord? Look, Sonia, if all I killed was a louse, A loathsome, useless, harmful louse. But that louse was a human being. Oh, I too know that she wasn't really a louse, he replied, looking at her strangely. Actually, I'm talking nonsense, Sonia, he added. I've been doing that for a long time now. All that's wrong. You're quite correct. The real reasons involved are quite different. I haven't spoken to anyone for such a long time, Sonia. My head's aching very badly now. His eyes were burning with a feverish light. He was almost beginning to rave. A restless smile flickered on his lips. Through his excited state of mind, a terrible helplessness could now be glimpsed. Sonia understood the agony he was in. Her head was also beginning to go round. What strange things he had said! She thought she had understood some of them, but how can it be? How can it be? O merciful Lord! She wrung her hands in despair. Yes, Sonia. It's wrong, he began again, suddenly raising his head as though an unexpected turn of thought had occurred to him and roused him to excitement again. It's wrong, yes, you'd do better to suppose. Yes, this is really much better, that I'm vain, envious, spiteful, nasty and vindictive, well, and if you like, also with a leaning towards insanity. You may as well have it all at once. People have spoken of insanity before, so I've observed. Look, I told you just now that I was unable to support myself while I was at university, but you know, I might very well have been able to. My mother would have sent me money to pay the fees. I could have earned enough by myself for boots, clothes and bread. I know I could have. There was private teaching to be had. They were offering 50 kopecks an hour. Razumikin works, you know, but I turned spiteful and refused. Yes, spiteful, that's the right word for it. And then like a spider I crept away and hid in my corner. I mean, you've seen my rat hole. You've been there. And you know, Sonia, low ceilings and cramped rooms cramp the soul and the mind too. How I hated that rat hole. Yet even though I hated it, I didn't want to leave it. I made a special point of not wanting to. I stayed in it for days on end, unwilling to work, unwilling even to eat, just lying there. If Nastasia brought me food, I'd eat it. If she didn't, I'd let the day go by without eating. I wouldn't ask for anything out of spite. I had no light at night. I just lay there in the darkness. I refused to earn money to buy candles. I was supposed to be studying, but I'd sold all my books. There's a finger's thickness of dust lying on the papers and exercise books on my table now. I preferred simply to lie there thinking, and I went on thinking and thinking. And what dreams I had! Such strange and diverse dreams! There'd be no point in trying to tell you them. The thing was, though, that I also began to imagine... No, that's not right. I'm not telling you correctly again. You see, I'm kept asking myself, why am I so stupid? Why is it that if others are stupid, and I know for certain fact that they're stupid, I don't want to be cleverer? And then, Sonia, I realised that if I were to wait until everyone else had grown cleverer, I'd have to wait for a very long time. Then I also realised that that was never going to happen, that people aren't going to change, and that no one can make them any different from what they are, and that it's not worth the effort to try. Yes, that's how it is. That's the law they operate by. It's a law, Sonia. It really is true. And now I know, Sonia, that whoever is strong and powerful in mind and spirit is their lord and master. Whoever takes a lot of liberties is right in their eyes. Whoever is able to spit on most things they consider their lawgiver, and the person who takes the most liberties of all is the one who is most in the right. That's how it's been in the past. That's how it will always be. Only a blind person could fail to perceive it. Although he was looking at Sonia as he said this, Raskolnikov was no longer concerned about whether she understood what he was saying or not. His fever had completely taken hold of him. He was in a kind of black ecstasy. It was true, he really had not spoken to anyone for a very long time. Sonia realized that this black catechesis had become his creed and his law. And then it was, Sonia, that I understood, he went on ecstatically, that power is given only to those who dare to lower themselves and pick it up. Only one thing matters, one thing, to be able to dare. It was then that I conceived a certain idea for the first time in my life, an idea that has never occurred to anyone before me, not anyone. I suddenly saw, as clearly as the sun, that in the past no one has ever dared, and still does not dare, quite simply to pick up all that absurd nonsense by the tail in passing and toss it to the devil. I wanted to make the dare. And so I killed someone. To make the dare. That was the only reason for it, Sonia. Oh, stop it, don't say any more, Sonia exclaimed, clasping her hands in dismay. You've strayed away from God, and God has laid his hand upon you and given you up to the devil. Come to think of it, Sonia, when I was lying there in the darkness imagining all those things, was that the devil stirring me up, eh? Stop it. Don't laugh, you blasphemer. You understand nothing. Oh, merciful Lord, he'll never, never understand. Be quiet, Sonia. I'm not laughing at all. I mean, I know it was the devil who led me to do it. Be quiet, Sonia, be quiet, he repeated, blackly and insistently. I know it all. All of that passed through my mind, and I whispered it to myself as I lay there in the darkness. I argued it all through with myself, right down to the last most insignificant detail, and I know it all of it. And I got so sick of all that drivel. I kept wanting to forget it all and make a fresh start, Sonia, to stop uttering drivel. Do you really think I went into it like a fool, head first? No, I went into it like a fellow with some brains, and that was my undoing. Do you really think I didn't know, for example, that the very fact that I'd started to search my conscience and ask myself whether I had any right to assume power over someone else like that meant that I didn't have any such right? Or the fact that I was asking myself the question, is man a louse? Meant that man wasn't a louse for me, but might very well be for someone to whom the question would never occur and who would go straight into action at once. Or finally, the fact that I'd spent so many days agonizing over the question of whether I was a Napoleon or not, meant that I knew beyond all shadow of doubt that I wasn't one. I endured the whole of the torment that drivel caused me, Sonia, and I tried to shake it off. I wanted to kill without casuistry, Sonia, to kill for my own sake, for no one but myself. I didn't want to lie about that, even to myself. I didn't kill in order to help my mother. That's rubbish. I didn't kill in order to get money and power, and thus be able to become a benefactor of mankind. That's rubbish too. I simply killed. I killed for my own sake, for no one but myself, and the question of whether I'd become someone's benefactor or spend all my life like a spider, drawing people into my web and sucking the vital juices from them, was a matter of complete indifference to me at that moment. And above all, it wasn't the money I wanted as a result of killing. At least, it wasn't so much the money as something else. I know all this now. You must understand me. In taking the path that I did, I might very well never have committed another murder again. It was something I needed to find out. It was something else that was forcing my hand. What I needed to know, and know quickly, was whether I was a louse like everyone else, or a man. Whether I could take the step across, or whether I couldn't. Whether I could dare to lower myself and pick up what was lying there, or not. Whether I was a quivering knave, or whether I had a right to kill. Whether you had a right to kill, Sonia cried, her hands still clasped in dismay. Oh, for God's sake, Sonia, he exclaimed in irritation, seemed on the point of delivering some retort, but then fell contemptuously silent. Stop interrupting me. I was simply trying to prove one thing to you, that the devil led me to do what I did, and only afterwards explained that I had no right to do it, because I'm just a louse like everyone else. He mocked at me, and so I came here to you. Receive your guest. If I weren't a louse, would I have come to you? Listen, When I went to see the old woman that day, I only intended to conduct a rehearsal. You may as well be aware of that. And you killed her. You killed her. But I mean, what sort of killing was it? Is that the way people kill? Do they go about it as I did that day? Some time I'll tell you how I went about it. Did I really kill the old woman? No. I was myself I killed. Not the old woman. I bumped myself off in one go, forever. And as for the old woman, it was the devil who killed her, not I. Enough, enough, Sonia, enough. Let me alone, he cried, suddenly in a convulsion of anguish. Let me alone. Placing his elbows on his knees, he jabbed the palms of his hands against his head like pincers. What suffering? The words broke from Sonia in a tormented wail. Well, what should I do now? Tell me that, he asked, lifting his head suddenly and looking at her with a face that was hideously distorted with despair. What should you do? She exclaimed, leaping up from her chair, and her eyes, hitherto filled with tears, suddenly began to flash. Get up! She gripped him by the shoulder. Slowly he began to get up, staring at her in near amazement. Go, immediately, this very moment. Go and stand at the crossroads. Bow down. First kiss the ground that you've desecrated. Then bow to the whole world, to all 4 points of the compass, and tell everyone out loud, I have killed. Then God will send you life again. Will you go? Will you? She demanded, quivering all over, as though she were in the throes of a seizure, gripping him by both hands, clenching them hard in her own, and staring at him with a gaze of fire. He was amazed, even shocked by her sudden ecstatic outburst. Is it penal servitude you mean, Sonia? Must I give myself up? He asked blackly. You must accept suffering and redeem yourself by it, that's what. No, I won't go to them, Sonia. But how will you live? How will you live? What will keep you alive? Sonia exclaimed. How will life be possible for you now? I mean, what will you tell your mother? Oh, what will happen to them now? But what am I saying? Why, you've already deserted your mother and sister. Yes, you've deserted them. Deserted them. Oh, merciful Lord, she exclaimed. Yes, he knows it, all himself. But how can you live without anyone at all? What will happen to you now? Don't behave like a child, Sonia, he said softly. In what way am I guilty in their regard? Why should I go to them? What would I tell them? All that's just ghosts. They themselves slaughter people in their millions, and they consider it a virtue too. They're scoundrels and villains, Sonia. I won't go to them. What would I say? That I'd killed her, but hadn't dared to take her money? Had hidden it under a building block? He added with a caustic and ironic smile. I mean, they'd laugh at me. They'd say, you were a fool not to take it. A coward and a fool. They wouldn't understand any of it, Sonia, not any of it, and they're not worthy of attaining such understanding. Why should I go to them? I won't. Don't behave like a child, Sonia. Oh, how you'll suffer, she kept saying, stretching out her arms to him in a desperate act of imploring. Perhaps I haven't done myself justice, he observed blackly, as though in reflection. Perhaps I'm still a human being. Perhaps I'm not a louse yet, and have been in too much of a hurry to condemn myself. I'll struggle a bit more yet. An arrogant smile was forcing itself to his lips. To bear suffering like that, for your whole life, your whole life! I'll get accustomed to it, he said, bleakly and reflectively. Look, he began a moment later, you've done enough crying, it's time we got down to business. I came to tell you that they're on my trail now, trying to ensnare me. No! Sonia screamed in fear. What are you screaming for? I thought you wanted me to go and do penal servitude, yet now you're terrified. But look, I'm not going to let them get me. I'll struggle a bit more with them yet, and they won't be able to lay a finger on me. They have no real evidence. Yesterday I was in great danger and thought the game was up, but today things are better. All their evidence is mere conjecture, and that means I can turn their accusations to my advantage, don't you see? And turn them I shall, because now I've learnt a lesson or two. There's no way I can avoid them putting me in jail. If it hadn't been for a certain incident, they'd have put me in jail this very day, and it's still quite probable that they will do just that. But that's nothing, Sonia. I'll do a little time. Then they'll let me out again, because they haven't got one piece of genuine proof. And they're not going to get one. Believe you me, with what they've got, they could never put a man on trial. Well, that's enough of that. I just wanted you to know. I'll do what I can to reassure my mother and sister and not frighten them. In any case, I think my sister's all right for the future now. And if that's so, my mother is too. Well, that's all. But be careful. Will you come and visit me in jail when I'm there? Oh, yes, yes. They both sat there together, sad and depressed, as though they had been thrown up on some empty seashore after a tempest alone. He looked at Sonia and felt how intensely her love was concentrated on him. And it was strange, but he suddenly experienced a sense of pain and aggrievement that anyone should love him as much as that. Yes, it was a strange and terrible sensation. As he had been walking to Sonia's, he had felt that in her lay his only hope and salvation. He had intended to unload at least a portion of his torments, and now suddenly, when the whole of her heart had directed itself towards him, he knew and felt that he was now inexpressibly more unhappy than he had been earlier. Sonia, he said, I think it might be better if you don't come and visit me when I'm in jail. Instead of replying, Sonia wept. Several minutes went by. Are you wearing a crucifix? She suddenly asked, unprompted, as though she had just remembered something. At first the question did not register with him. You're not, are you? Well, here you are. Take this one. It's made of cypress wood. I have another one made of copper. It belonged to Lisaveta. Lisaveta and I swapped crucifixes. She gave me hers, and I gave her mine, the one with the little icon on it. I shall wear Lisaveta's from now on, and this one's for you. Take it. I mean, it's my own. It's my own, she implored him. We shall go and suffer together, and we shall bear our crosses together. All right, then. Give me it, Raskolnikov said. He was reluctant to upset her. But suddenly he drew back his hand. Oh, not now, Sonia. Later, he added, in order to calm her. Yes, later, she agreed enthusiastically. When you go to your sufferings, that's when you must put it on. You'll come to me, I'll put it around your neck, and we'll pray and take the road together. Just then, someone knocked at the door 3 times. Sofya Semyonovna, may I come in and see you? A very familiar voice said in polite tones. Sonia raised towards the door in alarm. The blonde physiognomy of Lebenatzikov peered into the room.